Residents of a condo complex fight to keep their homes. Good evening. This is CTV News. I'm Denise Douglas.
And I'm Patricia Malone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Well, utility service to a Temple Hills condominium complex has been shut off, leaving more than 200 families with an uncertain future and residents scrambling to find housing.
For years, the Lynn Hill condominium complex has had issues with non-payment of utility bills, but in the end, they were always able to work something out. But today, that was not to be the case. At exactly 12:40 this afternoon, electricity to Lynn Hill condominiums in Temple Hills was shut off.
The last I heard, it was supposed to have been taken care of.
About 10 minutes after the power was cut, the gas was shut off, and these brightly colored notices, unfit for human habitation, were put up. Do you know what you're going to do?
No, have no idea. No idea.
More than 200 families living in the two towers will now be forced to find someplace else to live.
There's people in here that really don't have nobody, like me. I don't really have a lot of people to go to and ask, can I stay with them? I got a kid. I got a whole baby mother and I got a whole family up there, and that right there, you can see them right there. All the way up there, they sitting there telling that's not right.
Last week, Pepco and Washington Gas issued shutoff notices to the complex and county. Condo Association board member Stanley Briscoe says they tried to work something out.
And all we were asking for was a little more time, a few more months, so we could put this redevelopment plan in place. Okay. And now I don't know what's going to happen.
We'll work with customers for years on end if necessary. We'll take it to that extent. We'll really do everything we can to resolve any sort of outstanding billing issue. So it's a last resort for us to ever disconnect a customer.
And I hope you guys are working on a contingency plan to help these poor people out, myself included.
The county's social services department met with residents this morning, helping them to find other accommodations. Some say they were caught off guard.
I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have 5 children. You know, I can't just up and find an apartment today. So
we'll give them a reasonable amount of time to gather their belongings. We're talking about families moving, so it's going to take some time.
Lynn Hill has a long history of being on the edge. In 2014, WSSC threatened to shut off the water because of unpaid bills. But the complex was able to work out a plan. Now, whole families are trying to work out their futures beyond today.
I really want y'all to understand our pain, because it seems like the state of Maryland really don't care about our pain.
In Temple Hills, Byron Scott, CTV News.
And again, county officials say they will give residents time to move out their belongings, but they didn't specify a timeline.
Prince George's police continue to look for the person who shot a man in the garage at Iverson Mall earlier today. CTV's Sonia Shrivastava explains.
Well, the shooting happened around noon today here at the Iverson Mall. Now, if you take a look behind me, the garage is taped off with yellow caution tape, and we're told this happened right as the entrance to Burlington Coat Factory.
I heard a big fire, gunshot, and then after that, I heard 2 more fires.
Walt James lives directly behind the Iverson Mall garage. He and his friend Will both heard gunshots.
In the house, we just heard the commotion, heard the gunshots, just about the same pattern that he said, then the crash.
The shooting happened around noon in this parking garage right behind Burlington Coat Factory. You can see the entrance right there. Police say a male victim was shot several times. The suspect then ran away.
Right now, our detectives and our evidence technicians are at the scene canvassing, going over any and all evidence, possible surveillance footage, things of that nature, going door to door, talking to witnesses in the community.
The shooting does not appear to be random, but that is no consolation to some of the neighbors.
Yeah, in this area, that's what you're used to. It's pretty much what happens every other day.
You know, just glad it wasn't no fatalities. Can't mention that enough, you know. And it has been a long time since something like this happened. I just hope that it doesn't happen anymore.
Now, police are currently working on a suspect description at this time. Now, as a precaution, 2 nearby schools have been put on lockdown as a precaution. In Temple Hills, I'm Sonia Shrivastava. Back to you.
Sonia tells us that the lockdown at the schools has since been lifted. Anyone with information is asked to call police. An advocacy group for people with disabilities is speaking out against a bill before the county council. B. Rogers is with the Prince George's Provider Council. She says the measure would allow agencies that provide services to those with developmental and intellectual disabilities to exempt themselves from the new minimum wage requirement. That would make them less competitive and potentially undercut the work they do helping people like Curtis Randolph. We spotlighted Randolph, who got his job through ARC last week. Here's more on what Rogers had to say.
It sends a bad message. What it says to us is that your people who care for the most vulnerable populations don't deserve minimum wage. And I think it would probably, from what we can find out nationally, we would be the first jurisdiction that said that to the workers who care for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I don't know that that's the message we would want for Prince George's County.
It doesn't really make you competitive then?
No, it takes away the minimal competitiveness we have. Other jurisdictions, like the District of Columbia and Montgomery County, are already paying this and supplementing their staff to make sure that they can, in fact, meet the requirements of.
A hearing on the bill is being held today. The Prince George's Provider Council works with 25 agencies that care for approximately 2,000 people with disabilities.
Well, in just 2 days, residents across the state will be heading to the polls, and for those with disabilities, casting ballots will become much easier and more private. Now, officials say voting sites will have new accessible ballot marking devices. The equipment will come with a Braille keypad and a headset.
The new accessible voting system is great for a couple of reasons, the most important of which it allows those of us who are blind or who have other disabilities that make it difficult or impossible for us to read or mark the paper ballots to actually mark those ballots.
Two of the steps have been, or particularly for voters with disabilities, at the check-in table, every voter will be advised, if needed, there's an accessible way to read or mark your ballot. So they're advised that at check-in. And then at the ballot issue station, they're advised at stage 2, do they need assistance or they want assistance to use the ballot marking device. And the ballot marking device is fully ADA compliant and accessible for voters whether they have visual impairment or they are using a sip and puff device and wish to have assistance in marking a ballot. That does not count ballots, it simply helps voters mark their ballot.
And that system will be available during early voting and the general election. Well, federal prosecutors will be working with state authorities to make sure everything runs smoothly and fairly on Tuesday, November 8th. As part of the Justice Department's nationwide Election Day program, the U.S. Attorney's Office is appointing a district election officer to oversee the process. In Maryland, Leo Wise will be in charge of managing the federal response to any complaints of election fraud or voter rights abuses. Wise will be on duty while polls are open. Maryland voters can contact him at 410-209-4800. Possible violations can also be reported directly to the Civil Rights Division's voting section at justice.gov. And you are watching CTV News. I'm Patricia Vallone.
And I'm Denise Douglas. Up